Story number 1. Whispers of the Forgotten Lullaby. Winter in Oregon's Cascade Range is a formidable force. The mountains, draped in thick blankets of snow, stand silent and imposing against the gray skies. When I decided to leave behind the bustling chaos of academia for a few months, seeking solitude and inspiration for my research on local folklore, the old wooden house perched on the outskirts of Mount Thayer seemed like the perfect refuge. Little did I know, the house harbored secrets that would blur the lines between myth and reality, plunging me into a nightmare I couldn't have imagined. The house was a relic from another era, its weathered logs and stone chimney exuding a rustic charm that immediately captivated me. Nestled among towering pines, it overlooked a frozen lake that mirrored the desolate beauty of the winter landscape. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of aged wood and lingering memories. Large windows offered panoramic views of the snow-covered wilderness, and a spacious living room with a grand fireplace promised cozy evenings spent immersed in research and reflection. On my first night, as the wind howled outside and snowflakes danced against the windows, I set up my recording equipment, eager to capture the sounds of the winter night. My goal was simple: to record the natural symphony of wind and wildlife that had inspired countless local legends. I believed that by isolating these sounds, I could better analyze the folklore that had always intrigued me. However, as midnight approached, something felt inexplicably wrong. The usual sounds of the wind were absent, replaced by an eerie silence that hung heavy in the air. I glanced at my equipment, expecting to see nothing out of the ordinary, but instead, the audio levels spiked unexpectedly, and my recorder captured a melody that sent chills down my spine. A haunting lullaby sung in an archaic language I couldn't comprehend. Curiosity and fear battled within me as I replayed the recording. The melody was beautiful yet profoundly sorrowful, each note resonating with an otherworldly quality that defied natural explanation. I listened again, closer this time, trying to discern any recognizable words or phrases. But the language was foreign, ancient, as if it belonged to a forgotten civilization long erased from history. Determined to understand the source of the lullaby, I decided to explore the house further. As I wandered through the dimly lit halls, I felt a presence, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift in the air. The house seemed to breathe around me, the walls whispering secrets that I couldn't quite grasp. I reached the attic, a space cluttered with old furniture and dusty trunks. Among the debris, I discovered a faded photograph of a woman standing by the very window that now held the spectral figure I would soon encounter. That night, as I reviewed my recordings, the lullaby played again. More clearly this time, the melody seemed to beckon me, pulling me deeper into the mystery that surrounded the house. I couldn't shake the feeling that the lullaby was a message, a plea for help from a soul trapped between worlds. Determined to uncover the truth, I delved into the local archives, scouring old newspapers and town records for any mention of a family or individual associated with the house. What I found was a tragic story of the Whitaker family, who had lived in the house over a century ago. According to the records, Eleanor Whitaker, a young mother, had lost her children during a devastating blizzard. Desperate and grief-stricken, she had conducted desperate rituals, hoping to communicate with the spirits of her lost children and bring them back. The townsfolk whispered about strange lights and eerie melodies emanating from the house during the stormy nights, attributing them to Eleanor's madness or dark supernatural forces. Armed with this knowledge, I returned to the attic, the photograph of Eleanor serving as a silent witness to the horrors that had transpired. I decided to perform a ritual, guided by the fragmented notes I had pieced together from Eleanor's journals, fragments I had found tucked away in one of the old trunks. The ritual was meant to honor Eleanor's sorrow and release the trapped spirits that lingered in the house. As I began the incantations, the temperature in the room dropped sharply, my breath visible in the icy air. The house groaned under the weight of the storm outside, and the lullaby played once more, louder and more insistent than before. Shadows danced along the walls, coalescing into the form of a woman, Eleanor Whitaker herself, her eyes hollow with grief. "Eleanor," I whispered, my voice trembling, "I am here to help you find peace." The apparition reached out towards me, her hand passing through my form as if I were made of mist. Tears welled in my eyes as I continued the ritual, pouring my heart into the words that echoed Eleanor's own desperate pleas. The room seemed to pulse with energy, the air thick with sorrow and longing. Suddenly, the lullaby ceased, replaced by a profound silence. The temperature began to rise, the oppressive chill lifting as Eleanor's figure faded into the ether. The shadows receded, and the house settled into a peaceful stillness. Exhausted but hopeful, I knew that the ritual had worked, that Eleanor and her children had finally found the peace they had long sought. In the weeks that followed, the strange occurrences in the house ceased entirely. The recordings no longer captured the haunting lullaby, and the air felt lighter, unburdened by the weight of past tragedies. I continued my research, documenting the story of the Whitaker family and the rituals that had both cursed and ultimately freed their spirits. The experience profoundly changed me. I realized that folklore and ghost stories held deeper truths, echoes of real suffering and unresolved grief that lingered in forgotten places. The wooden house on Mount Thayer had been more than just a refuge. It had been a vessel for sorrow and a testament to the enduring bond between mother and child. As winter gave way to spring, I decided it was time to leave Pinecrest House, my mission of uncovering and honoring the past complete. As I drove away, the first rays of sunlight breaking through the lingering snow, I felt a sense of closure. The house stood silent and serene, the secrets now laid to rest. Years later, I still think back to that winter in Oregon, the haunting lullaby that led me to uncover a family's tragic story. The whispers of the past had been heard and honored, allowing the spirits to finally find peace. Pinecrest House remains a symbol of the thin veil between our world and the beyond, a reminder that some stories are meant to be heard, and some spirits deserve to be remembered. If you ever find yourself wandering through the snowy trails of Oregon's mountains, remember the tale of Eleanor Whitaker and the wooden house that stood as a silent guardian of her sorrow. Respect the histories embedded in the places you inhabit, for some homes hold memories that linger long after the snow has melted, and some lullabies echo through the winds, waiting to be heard by those willing to listen. Story number 2. Shadows over Pinecrest. Winter in New Hampshire was a sight to behold. The snow-covered pines stood tall and silent, their branches heavy with pristine white. When my wife, Karen, and our 2 children, Lily and Ben, decided to purchase the old wooden house in Pinecrest, we envisioned peaceful weekends away from the chaos of our daily lives. Little did we know, the house harbored secrets that would plunge us into a nightmare we couldn't escape. The house itself was charming, albeit a bit worn from years of neglect. Its rustic charm was exactly what drew us in: exposed wooden beams, a stone fireplace, and large windows that offered breathtaking views of the surrounding forest. We spent the first few days unpacking and settling in, marveling at the beauty of our new retreat. The children were thrilled to explore the sprawling backyard, building snowmen and sledding down the gentle slopes nearby. On our first night, as the wind howled outside and snowflakes danced against the windows, we gathered around the fireplace. Karen had brought out an old photo album she found in the attic, filled with black and white pictures of previous occupants. One photograph caught my eye: a woman standing by the second-floor window, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of the setting sun. Her presence was oddly captivating, yet there was an unmistakable sadness in her stance. The days passed peacefully, but as the first snowstorm of the season rolled in, an unsettling atmosphere began to descend upon the house. It started subtly, strange noises in the dead of night, shadows that seemed to move just out of sight, and an ever-present chill that settled into our bones. We tried to brush it off, attributing it to the old house settling or the harsh winter weather, but the feeling of being watched never left us. One evening, after a particularly fierce storm, we noticed something strange. From outside the second-floor window, we saw the unmistakable silhouette of a woman standing alone, staring directly at our house. Her figure was ethereal, almost ghostly, and she seemed to be watching us with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. What was even more bizarre was that there were no footprints on the freshly fallen snow leading up to the window. It was as if she had appeared out of nowhere. Karen was the first to voice her concern. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, unable to tear my eyes away from the window. "Yeah, there's no way someone climbed up there. It was too sudden." Lily and Ben were equally disturbed. "Maybe it's just someone playing a trick on us," Ben suggested, trying to sound brave. But even his words couldn't mask the fear in his eyes. The next morning, determination set in. We decided to investigate the history of the house, hoping to uncover any clues that could explain the mysterious apparition. Our search led us to the local library, where we pored over old records and newspaper archives. It was there we discovered the tragic story of Eleanor Whitaker, the woman from the photograph. Eleanor had been the last resident of Pinecrest House, living there with her husband and young daughter in the early 1900s. According to the records, Eleanor had been a kind and gentle woman, beloved by the community. However, tragedy struck one winter night when a blizzard ravaged the area. Eleanor and her family were found dead in the house, victims of the unforgiving storm. The circumstances surrounding their deaths were never fully explained, but rumors suggested a possible avalanche or a catastrophic house fire. As we delved deeper, we uncovered accounts of strange occurrences reported by neighbors even before the family's disappearance. People spoke of eerie lights flickering in the windows, unexplained noises, and a pervasive sense of sorrow that seemed to emanate from the house itself. It became clear that Eleanor's spirit, along with her family's, was unable to find peace, forever bound to the place where their lives had been cut short. That night, armed with this newfound knowledge, we hoped to put the restless spirits to rest. We decided to hold a small memorial on the front porch, lighting candles and placing flowers near the window where Eleanor had often stood. As we lit the candles, the temperature inside the house dropped noticeably, the warmth of the fireplace no longer a comforting presence. We sat in silence, the only sound the crackling of the now dormant fireplace and the howling wind outside. Hours seemed to pass, but nothing unusual happened. Just as we began to relax, the familiar silhouette of Eleanor appeared once more on the second-floor window. This time, she didn't seem hostile but rather sorrowful, her eyes filled with longing. Lily, always the sensitive one, whispered, "She's trying to tell us something." Karen nodded, her eyes fixed on the apparition. "Maybe she needs our help." Gathering our courage, we decided to communicate with her. "Eleanor," I called out softly, "we're here to help you find peace." For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the air grew thick with an unexplainable energy, and the room filled with a soft, mournful melody that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Eleanor's figure began to shimmer, her form becoming more translucent as if she were fading away. "We remember your pain," Karen said, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing at her. "Please, find peace." The melody swelled, enveloping us in its haunting beauty. The temperature began to rise, the chill dissipating as Eleanor's apparition brightened. Her expression softened, a gentle smile replacing the sorrow in her eyes. Slowly, she reached out towards us, her hand passing through the window as she stepped forward into our living room. As she moved closer, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, replaced by a serene calm. Eleanor's spirit stood before us, her presence no longer menacing but comforting. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "for remembering us." With those final words, her form dissolved into a cascade of sparkling light, the last remnants of her spirit finding the peace they had long sought. The house returned to its former warmth, the candles flickering gently as if acknowledging her departure. In the days that followed, The strange occurrences ceased entirely. The shadows no longer moved on their own, and the chilling whispers were replaced by the peaceful sounds of nature. Our time in Pinecrest House became a cherished memory, a testament to the enduring power of empathy and the importance of remembering those who had been lost. Winter in New Hampshire continued to blanket the landscape in snow, each season bringing a new layer of beauty to Pinecrest House. We spent countless peaceful nights by the fireplace, the memories of our encounter with Eleanor lingering as a reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead. Sometimes, when the snow falls just right and the wind carries a faint melody through the trees, I catch a glimpse of a woman's silhouette on the second-floor window. But now, instead of fear, I feel a deep sense of gratitude for the family who once called this place home and for the opportunity to help them find their way to peace. If you ever find yourself in New Hampshire, seeking solitude in the embrace of winter, remember the story of Pinecrest House and Eleanor Whitaker. Respect the histories embedded in the places you inhabit, for some homes hold memories that linger long after the snow has melted, and some spirits find their peace only when their stories are heard and honored. Story number 3. Whispers of the Snowbound House. Winter in Colorado is a stark, unforgiving season. The mountains, draped in thick blankets of snow, stand as silent sentinels against the biting cold. I had always been drawn to the solitude that the wilderness offered, a stark contrast to the chaos of city life. When the opportunity arose to purchase an old wooden house nestled deep within the Rockies, I didn't hesitate, promised the peace and quiet I craved, a sanctuary where I could write and reconnect with nature. Little did I know, the house harbored secrets that would plunge me into a nightmare I couldn't escape. The house stood alone, surrounded by dense pine forests and overlooking a frozen lake that mirrored the desolate beauty of the landscape. This wooden frame was weathered, the paint peeling from years of neglect. Large windows were partially boarded up, and the porch sagged under the weight of accumulated snow. Despite its dilapidated state, there was an undeniable charm to the place, a sense of history that whispered through its very walls. On the first night, as I settled into the cozy yet creaky living room, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows and sending shivers down my spine. I lit a fire in the stone fireplace, the warmth providing a comforting contrast to the chill that permeated the air. As I sipped my tea, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The house seemed alive, every creak and groan amplified by the silence of the snowy night. The following morning, I ventured outside to explore my new home and its surroundings. The snow had fallen heavily overnight, transforming the landscape into a pristine, white wonderland. The air was crisp, each breath visible as it escaped my lips. As I walked around the property, I discovered remnants of the house's former life: old, rusted tools in the shed, a broken swing set in the backyard, and an overgrown garden that once bloomed with vibrant flowers. That evening, as dusk settled over the mountains, I began to hear it, the faint sound of a child's laughter, echoing through the trees. At first, I dismissed it as the wind playing tricks on my ears, but the sound grew louder, more persistent. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped onto the porch, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. The laughter ceased as suddenly as it had begun, leaving me with an unsettling silence. Days turned into weeks, and the strange occurrences became more frequent. Every night, just before midnight, I would hear the soft, sorrowful cries of a little girl, carried by the wind. The sound was heart-wrenching, filled with a longing that pierced through the cold night air. Some nights, the cries would escalate into desperate wails, reverberating through the house and freezing me to the core. One particularly cold night, the storm raged outside, the wind howling like a chorus of lost souls. The house shook under the force of the blizzard, snow piling against the windows and doors. As midnight approached, the familiar cries began, louder and more anguished than ever before. My heart raced as I realized that the cries were coming from outside the house, emanating from the depths of the surrounding forest. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I decided to investigate. I grabbed my heavy coat, bundled up to protect against the frigid temperatures, and stepped into the storm. The snow was relentless, each step forward an arduous task as the wind whipped against my face. The sound of the cries grew louder, guiding me deeper into the woods until I reached a clearing illuminated by the pale light of the moon. In the center of the clearing stood an old, abandoned playground, the swings creaking in the wind and the merry-go-round spinning slowly despite the absence of any breeze. There, standing beneath a single, bare tree, was the apparition of a little girl. She wore a tattered dress, her hair matted and unkempt, eyes hollow and filled with sorrow. Her presence was ethereal, a ghostly figure bound to the forsaken playground. "Why are you here?" I whispered, unable to tear my eyes away from her mournful gaze. She didn't respond with words, but the expression on her face conveyed a deep, unending sadness. Suddenly, the ground beneath her began to shift, and the snow swirled around us in a frenzied dance. The cries intensified, merging with the howling wind to create a cacophony of despair. I felt an overwhelming sense of dread, as if the very essence of the storm was trying to pull me into the darkness alongside her. Without warning, her form began to fade, the edges of her body dissolving into the snowflakes around us. The cries turned into anguished screams, echoing through the forest as I stood frozen, powerless to stop the apparition from vanishing. The storm seemed to intensify, the wind's fury now a manifestation of the sorrow that had trapped her in this eternal winter. I stumbled back towards the house, the oppressive cold making my movements sluggish. As I reached the porch, the storm began to abate, the wind dying down as quickly as it had ramped up. The little girl's presence lingered, her sorrowful cries fading into a haunting silence that settled over the house once more. In the days that followed, I delved into the history of the house, seeking answers to the mystery that had unfolded before me. I discovered that the house had once belonged to the Harlow family, who had tragically lost their daughter, Lily, during a severe snowstorm many years ago. The night she disappeared, the family reported hearing her cries echoing through the woods, pleading for help. Despite extensive searches, no trace of Lily was ever found, and the family eventually moved away, leaving the house to succumb to the relentless march of time and weather. Understanding the depth of Lily's sorrow, I realized that her spirit was trapped by the unresolved grief and the unending search for her. Determined to help her find peace, I decided to conduct a ritual to honor her memory and release her from the confines of the frozen wilderness. Armed with knowledge from old folklore and guided by a deep sense of empathy, I prepared the necessary items: candles, a photograph of Lily, and symbols of protection to perform the ritual on a particularly cold winter night. As midnight approached, I gathered in the living room, the house eerily quiet except for the distant whispers of the wind. Lighting the candles, I placed the photograph of Lily at the center, surrounding it with the protective symbols. I began to chant the incantations, my voice steady despite the lingering fear. The temperature dropped rapidly, the air thick with an otherworldly presence. The room grew colder, the flames flickering as if struggling against an unseen force. Suddenly, the cries began again, softer this time, more pleading than desperate. The apparition of Lily appeared in the reflection of the mirror, her eyes meeting mine with a mixture of hope and sorrow. She reached out towards the photograph, her hand trembling as it passed through the image, connecting with her frozen form. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the chanting. "Help me find my way home." I continued the ritual, my words intertwining with her silent plea. The candles burned brighter, the symbols glowing with an intense light that filled the room. Lily's apparition began to shimmer, her form becoming more defined as the ritual took hold. The cries softened, transforming into a harmonious melody that resonated with the essence of the house itself. With a final, heartfelt incantation, the light enveloped Lily, her spirit rising from the mirror and merging with the warmth of the candles. the oppressive cold lifted, replaced by a profound sense of peace that settled over the house. The apparition faded, her presence now a gentle whisper of gratitude rather than a haunting echo of sorrow. Exhausted but fulfilled, I sank into a chair, the house now a sanctuary of tranquility rather than a prison of despair. The strange lights ceased, and the whispers of the wind were no longer tinged with sorrow but carried a serene stillness. The mirror reflected only the present, free from the shadows of the past. In the months that followed, the house transformed from a place of fear to a haven of peace. The memories of the Harlow family's tragedy remained, but they were now honored through the peace Lily had found. My writing flourished, inspired by the journey I had undertaken to help a lost soul find her way home. Winter in Colorado remained beautiful and serene, the snow-covered landscape a constant reminder of the delicate balance between peace and sorrow. The wooden house by the frozen lake stood as a testament to the power of understanding and compassion, a beacon of light in the darkest of winters. And sometimes, on particularly quiet nights, I would catch a glimpse of a little girl's smile in the reflection of the mirror, a silent promise that some spirits, once freed, continue to watch over the places they once called home. If you ever find yourself seeking solitude in the remote wilderness, remember the story of the Harlow family and the mirror that bridged the gap between the living and the dead. Respect the histories embedded in the places you inhabit, for some homes hold memories that linger long after the snow has melted, and some spirits find their peace only when their stories are heard and honored. Story number 4. The Mirror of Dark Waters. Winter in Michigan can be both breathtaking and brutal. The snow transforms the landscape into a pristine, silent expanse, where every sound is muffled by the thick blanket of white. When my wife, Laura, and our 2 children, Emily and Ben, decided to move to a secluded wooden house on the shores of Lake Michigan, we were seeking tranquility away from the chaos of city life. The house, nestled among towering pines, promised peace and a fresh start. Little did we know, it held secrets that would plunge our lives into darkness. The house was everything we had hoped for: charming, spacious, and surrounded by nature's beauty. Its large windows offered stunning views of the frozen lake, and the fireplace provided a cozy centerpiece for our new home. On our first night, as snowflakes danced outside, we unpacked and settled into our new surroundings. It was during this unpacking that we discovered the antique mirror tucked away in the attic, covered in a thick layer of dust. The mirror was ornate, with a heavy wooden frame intricately carved with swirling patterns that seemed to move when viewed from the corner of my eye. Despite its age, the glass was clear, reflecting the room perfectly. Intrigued by its beauty, I decided to hang it in the hallway where it could greet us every morning. At first, the mirror was simply a beautiful addition to our home, but as the days grew colder and the nights longer, strange things began to happen. It started subtly. Laura would catch glimpses of shadows moving just beyond the reflection, figures that vanished when she turned to look directly. Emily and Ben, with their vivid imaginations, would insist that they saw things in the mirror that weren't there, like fleeting images of people or animals that disappeared as quickly as they appeared. One particularly harsh winter night, with the wind howling outside and the house creaking under the weight of the snow, Laura and I were awakened by a loud thud coming from the hallway. We sat up in bed, hearts pounding, as the sound echoed through the house. Slowly, we got out of bed and approached the hallway, our footsteps silent on the wooden floor. As we entered the hallway, the antique mirror stood as it always did, reflecting the dimly lit space. But tonight, something was different. The room in the mirror was not our own. Instead, it showed a desolate, dark version of the hallway, lit by an eerie, unnatural light. Shadows danced along the walls, and in the distance, we could see the faint outline of a figure standing near the staircase. "Did you see that?" Laura whispered, her voice trembling. I nodded, unable to tear my eyes away from the mirror. The figure in the reflection began to move, slowly turning its head to face us. Our own reflections stared back at us. But the mirror's version of ourselves remained motionless, as if trapped in another world. Suddenly, the figure in the mirror reached out, his hand extending towards us. A chill ran down my spine as I felt an inexplicable pull, as if an invisible force was trying to drag me into the glass. I grabbed Laura's hand tightly, pulling her away from the mirror just as the figure lunged forward. The room around us seemed to shimmer, and for a moment, I thought I could feel the icy grip of the figure trying to pull me in. Breathing heavily, we backed away from the mirror, our hearts racing. The reflection returned to normal, showing only our hallway and our own bewildered faces. That night marked the beginning of our family's descent into fear. The mirror became a gateway to something dark and malevolent. Each night, the strange phenomena intensified. We would hear soft whispers emanating from the mirror, voices pleading for help or warning us to leave. Sometimes, the figures in the reflection would move closer, their expressions twisted in anguish and desperation. Emily, ever the curious one, began to document everything. She drew sketches of what she saw in the mirror and kept a journal of the strange occurrences. Her drawings depicted shadowy figures and eerie landscapes, always centered around the mirror. Ben, on the other hand, became increasingly withdrawn, spending hours staring into the glass as if searching for something or someone hidden within. Determined to uncover the truth, Laura and I decided to research the history of the house. We visited the local library, digging through old records and newspaper archives. It was there we discovered the dark past of our home. The house had once belonged to a man named Elias Thompson, a recluse who had become obsessed with the occult. Neighbors reported strange rituals and loud noises, and one winter night, a terrible tragedy struck. Elias and his family vanished without a trace, leaving behind an empty house and a community gripped by fear. The antique mirror, we learned, had been a central piece in Elias's rituals, a conduit to the spirit world. It was said that he had intended to communicate with the dead, but something had gone horribly wrong. The mirror became a portal for restless spirits, trapping their souls and binding them to the physical world. Armed with this knowledge, we knew we had to act. Emily and Ben had become increasingly affected by the mirror's presence, and the safety of our family was at stake. We decided to confront whatever was haunting our home, hoping to free the trapped spirits and restore peace to our lives. One stormy night, as lightning illuminated the darkened sky and thunder shook the house, we gathered the necessary items for a cleansing ritual: salt, candles, and protective symbols we had found in Elias's old journals. Emily led the way, her small hands carefully placing the items around the mirror. Laura and I stood beside her, holding our children close. As we began the ritual, the atmosphere in the house shifted. The temperature dropped further, and the air grew thick with tension. The whispers from the mirror escalated into a cacophony of voices, pleading and wailing in unison. The figures in the reflection surged forward, their forms becoming more defined and aggressive. "Please, help us," the voices cried out, their desperation palpable. I began chanting the protective incantations, my voice steady despite the fear gripping me. Laura joined in, her voice blending with mine as we recited the ancient words meant to banish the spirits. Emily and Ben held each other, their eyes fixed on the mirror, their faces pale but resolute. The mirror began to glow, the light emanating from within growing brighter and more intense. The figures in the reflection writhed and twisted, their forms distorting as if struggling against an unseen force. The room shook, and the candles flickered violently, casting dancing shadows across the walls. "Release us," the voices demanded, their anger intensifying. We continued the ritual, our voices rising above the chaos. The mirror's surface rippled like water, the trapped souls fighting to break free. Suddenly, a blinding flash of light enveloped the room, and a powerful force knocked us off our feet. The last thing I remember was the mirror shattering into 1,000 pieces, the spirits finally finding the release they had longed for. When I regained consciousness, the storm had passed, and the house was eerily quiet. The shattered remnants of the mirror lay scattered on the floor. The oppressive presence lifted. We stood together, shaken but relieved, knowing that we had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. In the days that followed, the house returned to its peaceful state. The whispers ceased, and the strange lights were no longer a presence in our home. Emily and Ben slowly recovered from their experiences, their eyes no longer haunted by the mirror's reflections. Laura and I felt a profound sense of relief, grateful that our family was safe. However, the ordeal left an indelible mark on us. We had come face to face with the supernatural, a reminder of the thin veil between our world and the unknown. The wooden house on Lake Michigan remained a symbol of both beauty and darkness, a place where we had confronted our fears and protected our loved ones from the shadows that once lurked within. Years have passed since that winter, and we have moved away from the house, seeking new beginnings elsewhere. But the memories of those cold nights and the mirror's dark reflections linger in our minds, a testament to the resilience of our family and the enduring power of love in the face of darkness. If you ever find yourself drawn to a secluded house on the shores of Lake Michigan, remember the story of the Harlow family. Respect the histories embedded in the places you inhabit. For some homes hold secrets that can reach out from beyond the glass, whispering tales of sorrow and pleading for peace. And if you ever encounter an antique mirror, look beyond its surface. Some reflections hide shadows that yearn to break free from the darkness. Story number 5. The Hunter's Wooden House, Cursed Grounds. Winter in Montana is unforgiving. The vast expanse of snow-covered pines and rugged mountains stretches endlessly, a silent testament to nature's raw power. My name is Jack Harlow, a seasoned hunter who sought solace in these remote woods after years of chasing shadows in the bustling cities. The promise of peace and solitude led me to a small wooden house perched on the edge of Bear Ridge, overlooking a dense forest that seemed untouched by time. The house was modest, built from sturdy timber with a stone chimney that exhaled steady puffs of smoke into the crisp air. It had everything I needed: a cozy fireplace, ample storage for my hunting gear, and a panoramic view of the wilderness. For the first few weeks, life here was exactly what I had hoped for. Days were spent trekking through snow-laden trails, tracking game, and relishing the quiet that enveloped me each night. However, as the days grew shorter and the nights longer, an unsettling presence began to make itself known. It started with faint sounds, soft thuds, and the occasional creak of the house settling under the weight of the snow. I dismissed them as the natural noises of an old house in a secluded area. But soon, the sounds grew more distinct, more deliberate. One particularly cold night, around midnight, I was awakened by a loud thud on the front porch. My heart raced as I reached for my hunting knife, the only weapon I trusted in these isolated woods. I approached the window cautiously, peering into the darkness. The porch was empty, the snowflakes swirling in the dim light of the moon. I exhaled slowly, telling myself it was just a branch falling or some animal seeking shelter. But the sounds persisted. Every night, without fail, there was a series of heavy footsteps surrounding the house. They moved with purpose, pacing back and forth, never lingering too long. No one was ever seen, yet the weight of their presence was undeniable. The air inside the house grew colder, and the once comforting silence was now filled with an oppressive tension. Determined to uncover the source of these disturbances, I decided to explore the grounds around the house. One evening, bundled up against the biting cold, I grabbed a flashlight and ventured into the forest. The snow crunched under my boots, and the trees loomed like silent sentinels in the darkness. As I walked, the footprints around the house became more frequent, leading away from the front door and disappearing into the dense woods. After hours of searching, I stumbled upon an unmarked grave hidden beneath a cluster of ancient pines. The ground was freshly disturbed, the earth still soft from recent rains despite the winter chill. My heart pounded as I knelt beside the grave, noticing the absence of a headstone or any identifying markers. It was as if the person buried here had been intentionally erased from history. A sense of dread washed over me. The legends of Bear Ridge spoke of a man named Elias Mercer, a recluse who had vanished mysteriously one winter night decades ago. Some said he had been a hermit. Others whispered of darker rituals performed in these woods. No official records or newspaper clippings confirmed his existence, adding to the enigma surrounding his disappearance. As I sat there, contemplating the unease that had settled over me, a sudden gust of wind swept through the forest, carrying with it faint whispers. They were indistinct at first, but gradually formed words that chilled me to the bone. "Leave this place. Do not linger." I stood abruptly, the message clear and urgent. My instincts screamed at me to flee, but something held me rooted to the spot. The air grew colder, the shadows deeper, and I felt an invisible weight pressing down on me. The ground beneath the grave seemed to pulse with a dark energy, and the whispers turned into mournful cries that echoed through the trees. I backed away slowly, the flashlight flickering as if struggling to stay lit. As I made my way back to the house, the feeling of being watched intensified. Every rustle of the wind, every snap of a twig, seemed to be directed towards me. The heavy footsteps resumed, this time louder and closer, encircling the house once more. Upon returning, I found the house exactly as I had left it, silent and still. But the atmosphere had changed. The fireplace was cold, and the usual warmth that greeted me each evening was absent. I felt an overwhelming sense of unease, a presence that lingered in every corner of the room. Determined to confront whatever haunted me, I decided to investigate the grave further. Over the next few days, I researched local archives, speaking with elderly residents and visiting the town library. The truth about Elias Mercer began to surface. He had indeed been a real person, a man obsessed with ancient rituals and the occult. His disappearance coincided with a series of unexplained phenomena in Bear Ridge, leading many to believe that his experiments had unleashed something beyond human comprehension. Armed with this knowledge, I realized that the disturbances were a manifestation of Elias's restless spirit, bound to the land by the very rituals he had performed. The unmarked grave was a stark reminder of the consequences of tampering with forces beyond our understanding. The spirits of those who had fallen victim to his dark practices were now seeking closure, and their unrest had seeped into my sanctuary. One stormy night, as the wind howled and the snow battered against the windows, the heavy footsteps returned with a vengeance. This time, I was prepared. I lit every candle in the house, hoping to dispel the darkness that had taken hold. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, filling the room with a cacophony of sorrow and anger. "Free us. Release us from the darkness." I stood firm, speaking aloud what I had learned about Elias Mercer and the rituals he had conducted. I expressed my desire to help the spirits find peace, to lay to rest the torment that bound them to this cursed land. The room seemed to pulse with energy, the air thick with anticipation. As I spoke, the symbols etched into the walls began to glow, their light merging with the candle's flames. The temperature dropped even further, my breath visible in the freezing air. The heavy footsteps approached, the spirits closing in around me, their presence overwhelming. In a final plea, I invoked the names of those who had suffered, offering apologies for disturbing their peace and promising to honor their memories. The whispers softened, transforming from cries of anguish to murmurs of gratitude. The symbols on the walls blazed with a purifying light, drawing the dark energy back into themselves. A sense of calm washed over the house as the spirits began to dissipate, their presence fading like mist in the morning sun. The heavy footsteps ceased, replaced by an overwhelming silence that felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. The last of the candles flickered out, leaving the room bathed in a serene stillness. Exhausted but relieved, I collapsed into a chair, the chill finally receding. The house felt different now, no longer a place of unrest but a home reclaimed from the shadows. The unmarked grave remained a solemn reminder of the past, but its presence no longer felt menacing. Instead, it stood as a testament to the power of understanding and the importance of honoring those who had been lost. In the months that followed, the disturbances ceased entirely. The house returned to its peaceful state. The winter nights now filled with the quiet beauty I had initially sought. I continued my life as a hunter, but with a newfound respect for the land and its history. The legends of Bear Ridge were no longer just stories but lived experiences that had shaped my understanding of the world. The Harlow family's wooden house remains on Bear Ridge, a silent guardian amidst the snow-covered pines. Visitors occasionally speak of a serene presence, a sense of peace that lingers in the air, a stark contrast to the turmoil that once plagued it. The unmarked grave stands as a solemn reminder of the past, a place where the restless spirits found their peace, and the curse of Bear Ridge was finally lifted. If you ever find yourself wandering through the Alaskan wilderness, seeking solitude in the embrace of nature, remember the story of the cold traveler and the Harlow family's ordeal. Respect the land and its history, for some places hold secrets that are best left undisturbed, and some spirits find peace only when acknowledged and honored. The woods are silent now, but the echoes of the past remind us that peace comes not from hiding but from understanding and compassion. Story number 6. The Midnight Knock. Winter in Alaska is a relentless adversary. The snowstorms come without warning, swallowing entire landscapes in white silence. My friends and I had always dreamed of experiencing the untouched beauty of the Alaskan wilderness, far from the chaos of our everyday lives. So, when the opportunity arose to rent an isolated wooden house nestled deep within the forest, we seized it without hesitation. Little did we know, our retreat would become a nightmare etched into our memories forever. The house stood alone, surrounded by towering pines heavy with snow. Its wooden exterior was weathered, the logs groaning under the weight of countless winters. The windows were small and shuttered, offering limited views of the vast, frozen expanse beyond. As we unloaded our gear, the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch endlessly into the darkness. Our group consisted of 5: myself, Sarah, Mike, Jenna, and Tom. Each of us had our reasons for seeking solace in the wilderness. For me, it was a chance to escape the suffocating demands of my job. Sarah, a photographer, yearned to capture the pristine beauty of untouched landscapes. Mike and Tom, both avid hikers, were eager for adventure, while Jenna sought peace after a tumultuous year. The first few days were idyllic. We spent our time exploring the surrounding trails, marveling at the untouched beauty of the Alaskan wilderness. Evenings were filled with laughter around the fireplace, sharing stories and enjoying the warmth that the old house provided. But as the days grew shorter and the nights colder, an undercurrent of unease began to settle over us. It started subtly. Late one night, as the wind howled outside, we heard a faint knocking at the front door. At first, we dismissed it as the wind playing tricks, the old house settling under the weight of the snow. But the knocking persisted, growing louder and more insistent with each passing night. One particularly frigid evening, around midnight, the knocking returned. This time, it was accompanied by a low, mournful creaking that echoed through the wooden beams of the house. Mike, ever the brave one, suggested we check it out. Armed with flashlights and a sense of camaraderie, we approached the door together. I hesitated, a chill running down my spine. Maybe it's just the wind, I suggested, trying to keep my voice steady. Jenna shook her head. It's too deliberate. Someone's trying to get in. We exchanged nervous glances before Sarah, the most level-headed among us, nodded. Let's see who's there. As Sarah opened the door, the wind howled louder, and a blinding gust of snow swept into the house, extinguishing the flashlight beams. In the pitch-black moment that followed, we heard nothing but the sound of our own breathing and the storm raging outside. When the lights flickered back on, the door stood open, but no one was there. Confusion and fear set in. Tom, always the skeptic, tried to rationalize it. Probably just another gust of wind, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. But the knocking didn't stop. Each night, like clockwork, it returned at midnight, followed by the same eerie silence. Then, one evening, after a particularly fierce storm, we discovered something unsettling. Small, mysterious footprints led from the front door into the dense forest beyond. They were unlike any animal tracks we'd seen, human in shape but distorted, as if frozen mid-step. More disturbingly, they ended abruptly, vanishing into the darkness with no sign of where they led. "We can't follow them," Sarah said, her eyes wide with fear. "It's too dangerous out there." Mike nodded in agreement. "And what if someone or something is out there?" The atmosphere in the house grew tense. Trust among us began to fray as the nights passed without explanation. Some of us avoided the front door entirely, while others stayed up late, unable to shake the feeling of being watched. Jenna became increasingly anxious, her laughter replaced by a constant unease. One night, after weeks of restless nights and unexplained phenomena, we decided to confront the mystery head-on. Armed with flashlights, we ventured out into the storm, following the trail of footprints deeper into the forest. The cold was biting, each breath a visible puff in the frigid air. The forest was unnaturally quiet. The only sounds our own footsteps crunching on the snow-covered ground and the distant howl of the wind. As we followed the trail, the footprints became more erratic, leading us further away from the safety of the house. Hours seemed to pass as we navigated through the dense woods, the storm showing no signs of abating. Just as our hope began to wane, we stumbled upon an old, abandoned cabin, its windows shattered and door hanging ajar. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay and something else, something metallic and sharp. The remnants of old furniture lay scattered, covered in a blanket of dust and grime. On the floor, we found symbols etched into the wood, intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with a faint, otherworldly energy. It was clear that this place had once been the site of something dark and ritualistic. Tom, ever the inquisitive one, picked up a tattered journal from a broken table. The pages were yellowed with age, the ink faded but still legible. As we began to read, a horrifying story unfolded, one of a secretive cult that had performed forbidden rituals in an attempt to harness the power of the wilderness. Their experiments had gone horribly wrong, resulting in the loss of several lives and the creation of restless spirits bound to the land. The final entry was a desperate plea for forgiveness, a warning to those who might follow in their footsteps. As we closed the journal, a cold wind swept through the cabin, extinguishing our flashlights and plunging us into darkness once more. Panic set in as we realized we were not alone. Figures began to materialize around us, ghostly apparitions of the cult members, their faces twisted in agony and sorrow. The air grew thick with their mournful cries, the sound echoing through the cabin like a haunting melody. The symbols on the floor began to glow, casting an eerie light that revealed the full extent of their torment. "We must leave," Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "This place isn't safe." But the spirits showed no signs of relenting. The apparitions reached out, their hands cold and translucent, attempting to drag us back into the depths of their sorrow. Fear paralyzed us, our minds racing for a way to escape the nightmare that had become our reality. Summoning every ounce of courage, Mike shouted, "We need to get out of here now." We turned and ran, the spirits chasing us through the cabin's broken walls and out into the storm. The footprints reappeared, leading us back towards the main house, but the trail now seemed endless, the way obscured by the blinding snow. Exhausted and terrified, we stumbled back to the wooden house, the storm closing in around us like a suffocating blanket. Inside, we barricaded the doors and windows, our breaths heavy and our hearts racing. The knocking at midnight resumed, louder and more desperate than ever before. The mysterious footprints had vanished, leaving us with the haunting reminder that something malevolent still lurked beyond our refuge. That night, as we huddled together for warmth, the whispers returned, softer now, like the distant echoes of the spirits we had encountered. We realized that leaving the house was no longer an option. The storm had trapped us, isolating us from the outside world and binding us to the restless souls that haunted the woods. Days turned into weeks as we endured the relentless winter storm. Food supplies dwindled, and our hope of rescue faded with each passing day. The house, once a symbol of refuge, became a prison of our own making, haunted by the echoes of the past and the whispers of the spirits that sought release. In the end, we never found a way to escape the grip of the winter storm. Our fate remains a mystery, lost to the snow-covered wilderness of Alaska. The wooden house still stands, a silent sentinel amidst the frozen woods, waiting for the next group of unsuspecting souls to seek shelter from the storm. If you ever find yourself driving through the Alaskan wilderness during the dead of winter, heed the warnings of the locals. The wooden house may offer temporary refuge, but the spirits that haunt the forest are relentless, their whispers carried by the wind, forever knocking at midnight, seeking peace that can never be found within the cold embrace of the endless snow. Story number 7. The Harlow Family's Winter Shadows. Winter in Vermont has a way of cloaking the landscape in both beauty and isolation. When my wife, Laura, and our 2 children, Emily and Jack, decided to leave the bustle of city life behind, the promise of a peaceful winter retreat in a secluded wooden house sounded like the perfect escape. Little did we know, the serenity we sought would be tainted by shadows from the past and whispers that echoed through the cold night. The house stood at the edge of Pinewood Forest, a sprawling expanse of towering pines and ancient oaks. It was a charming, albeit slightly weathered, structure with a wraparound porch and windows that framed the snow-covered woods like picture frames. The realtor had assured us that the previous owners had left for warmer climates, leaving the house pristine and untouched, eager to settle in. We unpacked our belongings and began to adapt to the rhythm of rural winter life. The first few days were idyllic. Laura enjoyed baking hearty meals, Emily reveled in building snowmen, and Jack took to exploring the woods, his laughter ringing through the crisp air. However, as the days grew shorter and the nights longer, an undercurrent of unease began to seep into our peaceful existence. It started with the lights. At first, they were faint glimmers in the distance, small, flickering orbs that danced among the trees. We dismissed them as reflections from distant houses or perhaps wildlife illuminated by our porch lights. But as nights turned into weeks, the lights became more frequent and inexplicably close. They hovered just beyond the treeline, pulsating with an otherworldly glow that no natural source could produce. One particularly frigid night, the temperature had plummeted to an unforgiving low. The wind howled through the trees, creating an eerie symphony of creaks and groans. Laura had tucked the children into bed, and I was sprawled on the couch, sipping a cup of hot cocoa, when I noticed the lights again. This time, they were brighter, more deliberate in their movement. Curiosity got the better of me. Wrapping myself in a thick blanket, I ventured outside, the biting cold numbing my fingers as I approached the edge of the porch. The lights swirled in intricate patterns, almost as if they were communicating. As I stepped onto the snow-covered ground, the whispers began, soft at first, like distant echoes carried by the wind. The whispers grew louder as I moved deeper into the yard. They were unintelligible, a chorus of voices blending into an indistinct murmur. My heart raced, a mix of fear and fascination compelling me forward. The lights seemed to react to my presence, shifting and swirling faster, as if trying to convey a message I couldn't comprehend. I reached the boundary of Pinewood Forest, the trees looming ominously against the night sky. The whispers intensified, filling my ears with a dissonant melody of sorrow and urgency. Suddenly, one of the lights detached itself from the group, moving directly towards me. It hovered inches above the ground, casting an ethereal glow on the snow beneath. I stood frozen, unable to move as the light began to form a shape, a human figure. Barely discernible but unmistakably there. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled back towards the house, the whispers turning into anguished cries that seemed to follow me every step. Bursting through the door, I slammed it shut, my breath coming in rapid gasps. Laura and the children woke at the commotion, their eyes wide with concern. "What is it?" Laura asked, her voice trembling. "I saw something," I replied, trying to steady my voice. "Lights, figures. I think we need to leave." Laura frowned, exchanging a worried glance with me. "Maybe it's just wildlife. Vermont winters can be harsh, and animals behave strangely." But the next morning, evidence of the night's encounter left no room for doubt. Small, intricate symbols were etched into the frost-covered windows, intricate designs that pulsed with a faint, residual energy. Laura's research revealed that the house had a darker history than we were led to believe. The previous owner, a man named Elias Hargrove, had been involved in a secretive group known as the Luminary Circle, a cult that believed in harnessing natural energies through ancient rituals. Local lore spoke of strange ceremonies held in the woods, rites meant to commune with otherworldly entities. The Luminary Circle had disbanded abruptly after a series of unexplained disappearances, with whispers suggesting that Elias had delved too deep into forbidden practices. Determined to understand the phenomena, Laura and I delved into the house's history, old newspaper clippings, forgotten journals, and interviews with longtime residents painted a picture of obsession and tragedy. The Luminary Circle had sought to tap into the very essence of winter's darkness, believing it held the key to eternal knowledge and power. But something had gone terribly wrong, resulting in the disappearance of several members and the collapse of their operations. Armed with this knowledge, we realized that the lights and whispers were remnants of Elias's failed experiments, spirits trapped between worlds, unable to move on. The symbols on the windows were protective wards, frantically trying to contain the restless energies within the house. One night, as another storm raged outside, the lights returned with renewed intensity. This time, the whispers were clearer, resonating with pain and desperation. Laura suggested we perform a cleansing ritual to appease the spirits and seal the dark energies once and for all. Following the instructions from Elias's journals, we gathered the necessary items: salt, candles, and a circle of protection drawn around the house. As midnight approached, the atmosphere grew thick with tension. The children were asleep, unaware of the impending confrontation. Laura and I stood at the center of the house, holding hands, our breaths visible in the frigid air. The lights flickered outside, their glow casting long shadows through the windows. The whispers escalated into a cacophony of voices, overlapping and overlapping in a haunting chorus. "We must appease them," Laura whispered, her voice steady despite the fear etched on her face. "We need to give them peace." Following the ritual meticulously, we chanted the ancient incantations, the words echoing through the empty halls. The symbols on the windows began to glow, their light merging with the candles we had placed around us. The temperature dropped further, the cold becoming almost unbearable as the spirits fought against the confines of the wards. Suddenly, the lights outside converged, forming a vortex of energy that surged towards the house. The whispers turned into wails, their sorrow transforming into rage. The wind howled violently, shaking the very foundation of the house. I felt a presence pressing against me, a force both malevolent and desperate. "Please, help us," the voices cried out, now a blend of agony and imploration. Laura squeezed my hand, her eyes meeting mine with unwavering determination. "We won't let you suffer anymore," she declared, her voice cutting through the chaos. As we continued the ritual, the vortex of lights began to dissipate, the spirit's resistance weakening. The symbols on the windows blazed with a purifying light, drawing the dark energies back into containment. The cries softened, the storm outside calming as the spirits found the peace they so desperately sought. With a final, resounding chant, the ritual reached its climax. The house was enveloped in a brilliant light, the oppressive cold lifting, replaced by a profound sense of tranquility. The symbols on the windows faded, their purpose fulfilled, and the remnants of the luminary circle's dark magic were sealed away. Exhausted but relieved, Laura and I collapsed onto the floor, the weight of the night's events lifting. The house, once a beacon of restless spirits, now stood silent and serene, the shadows of the past finally laid to rest. In the weeks that followed, the strange lights ceased, and the whispers became mere memories. Maple Hollow returned to its peaceful rhythm. The winter nights no longer haunted by echoes of tragedy. The children resumed their joyful activities, oblivious to the darkness that had once threatened our sanctuary. Reflecting on the experience, I realized the importance of understanding and respecting the histories embedded in the places we inhabit. The Harlow family's wooden house had been a vessel for both beauty and darkness, its legacy shaped by the actions of those who came before us. By confronting the shadows and offering compassion to the restless spirits, we had restored harmony to our winter retreat. Now, every winter, as the snow blankets Pinewood Forest, I sit by the fireplace with Laura, sharing stories of resilience and hope. The house remains a haven of warmth and love, a testament to the power of family and the enduring spirit of those who seek peace. And sometimes, when the wind whispers through the pines, I catch a faint, grateful sigh, a silent thank you from the shadows that once haunted our home. The Harlow family's winter in Vermont taught us that even in the coldest, darkest nights, light and love can pierce through the shadows, bringing warmth and solace to those who seek it most.